Well, hello, and look at everyone coming into the program tonight. We're so happy to see so many people leaving the Watchtower and wanting to come in and participate in our programs we do every Saturday night here on the six screens. So, anyways, we got a program coming up next. It's called Dick and Constance Borghi Expose the Watchtower. Now, if you are just leaving the organization, you must have a lot of questions. You must have a lot of things going through your mind right now. So, by all means, why don't you speak up? You see the telephone number, it's right there on the YouTube screen. It's also on Facebook. So, why don't you muster up the courage, as we say, and call in tonight? So, let's bring Dick and Constance on right now. Hello, Dick and Constance.
Hey, Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Well, there you are. My goodness, good to have you with us tonight, and looking forward to the program. And now, listen, if you guys want to go to about 9 o'clock, 8:45, be my guest. If you only want to stay on an hour, be my guest as well. But you do your thing. I'm here if you need me. So I'll kind of step in the background and let you guys take the program away. It's all yours.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Connie and Dick Show. And we've been doing a series now for the last few months on your psyche, your mental happiness. Are you happy? You know, every time there was a convention or district assembly, something like that, someone would always come on the platform and say, aren't we the happiest people in the world? And everybody claps like crazy. So you think, gee, maybe I'm really not that happy. I've got a lot of stress in my life. What is adding to this stress? Well, we're going to talk about a lot of the stress that the Watchtower puts on us. We've been talking now for the last few months on post-traumatic stress disorder, that when you think you have Armageddon coming down on you any minute now, that brings real stress, and it scares the heck out of Jehovah's Witness kids. And it's really a terrible thing. There's something else that goes on in the Watchtower. If you've done something wrong, you've sinned somehow, and everybody is a sinner. The only perfect person on the earth was Jesus Christ, and none of us are changing water into wine. So what they do when they can stress you out by using what we call toxic stress or shame. And how they do that is they'll call you up if you didn't get enough hours to make you feel guilty. If you've done something wrong, they'll privately prove you with 3 elders. That's going to make you feel guilty. They're going to publicly prove you, or they're going to disfellowship you. All of that stuff is traumatic. It leads to depression. Let's get into toxic stress. My wife has done a lot of research on this in the last few days. And Connie has a degree in psychology, and she's also studied counseling. Thank you. You know, psychology and counseling. She graduated top of her class from a top-notch college, Notre Dame, not the one in West Bend, but the one out in California. It's a very prestigious women's college that she graduated from, top of her class. So she's done a lot of research, so I hope you'll give her your undivided attention. I know what she's going to tell you is going to be able to help a lot of people, especially your PMOs. And especially if you've ever been disfellowshipped, or if you're feeling guilty, you're not getting enough hours, or what the Watchtower likes to do a lot is if you're not getting a lot of hours, they're going to say, you're blood guilty. That's a heck of a thing to put on somebody. It's very traumatic. All right, with no further ado, Connie will take it away on the on the toxic shame.
Yes. Okay, well, we thank you everyone for listening in. Rich and I have been doing a series of shows dealing with mental health. And this one tonight is toxic shame, which is something that I think will be quite informative for many of you, ex-JWs, JWs, PMOs. Many people have not heard the term. If they have heard the term, they might not necessarily be aware of what exactly toxic shame is. So I'd like to break the show down into a few categories. First of all, I'm going to define exactly what toxic shame is. We'll also mention just briefly what a healthy shame is, because healthy shame is totally different than toxic shame. Watchtower is all about toxic shame. So we'll discuss the definition, then we'll go into the causes. There are causes that have created toxic shame in a person's life. Next, we'll move on to symptoms and consequences. And then the final part will be, how can one overcome toxic shame? So I'd like to share some of the thoughts, but then of course the show is designed for you. And it's not as if Rich and I are going to do all the talking, but I would like to be able to cover those points so you have an overall 360-degree view of what toxic shame is and basically how to overcome it. Because we can talk about toxic shame all night. It's not going to do any good unless you have tools to learn how to overcome it. And that's our heart, is to help you to overcome it, because we love you and we want to help you with this. Okay, first of all, let me just define what toxic shame is. I just had it. Okay, here we go. Toxic shame is a pervasive feeling of deep-seated worthlessness and self-hatred that can often develop in childhood or adolescence due to experiences of trauma, abuse, or neglect. It is a belief that one is fundamentally bad, flawed, or inadequate, rather than simply having made mistakes or performed poorly in a specific situation. This feeling of being inherently bad can significantly impact mental and emotional well-being. And of course, it certainly has among the JWs. Okay, so that's the definition. In other words, it's something that's very deep. It's not that you just did something wrong or you did something bad. It's ingrained into your psyche. It's ingrained into your emotional well-being, and it's ingrained into basically who you believe that you are. And, I do have to say this, in the scriptures, we'll bring up this one scripture because it ties it all in. In Proverbs 23:7, God says, "For as a man thinks in his heart, so he is." Well, that applies with this toxic shame that many people who are JWs, ex-JWs, and so forth have, because they carry that with them. Our mind is always constantly sharing thoughts and ideas. We've got a recorder going on in our voice. There's thoughts all day long, every day, every week. And the thing is, many times these thoughts are not only negative, but they're extremely negative. Like, I am totally worthless. I am a good for nothing slave. Okay, that's Watchtower talk right there. I'm a horrible person. I'm supposed to be happy, and yet I don't have a real positive attitude about myself. I don't even really like myself that much, let alone love myself. That's something I'd like to talk about too briefly, because a lot of JWs have very, very low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and it all originates with the teachings that are designed specifically for Watchtower to keep people in this toxic shame state of mind. And even after one leaves the organization, they think, oh, that's all behind me. No, it's not, because you've got that stuff renting space in your head for years and years and years, until you learn to deal with this toxic shame, and until you learn to be kind to yourself and to eventually learn to love yourself. So those are some thoughts that I'd like to just share there. But with regards to that scripture, Proverbs 23:7, for as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Well, basically, that means that a person's inner thoughts and beliefs ultimately shape their character and how they live their life. How they live their life. In other words, a person's outward actions and behavior are a reflection of their internal mindset and perspective. Okay? You might think that nobody really knows. You can be a JW, put on this wonderful smile at all the meetings, at all the conventions, act like you're the happiest people in the world. But internally, what you've got going on in your mind is telling you very negative, destructive, shame, guilt, fear, all those. But we're talking about toxic shame. And that reaches your very core of who you believe that you are. So we have to understand what toxic shame is so that we can identify it. And that way, then we can learn to overcome it. But we cannot overcome it unless we know we have an issue with toxic shame. Okay, so that's the definition. Let's talk about some of the causes, okay? Some of the causes would be trauma. Okay, what type of trauma are we talking about? Well, trauma can come in a lot of different forms. Of course, the sexual abuse trauma. There's abuse with regards to domestic abuse. We've talked about situations of sisters, personally, I knew, that were getting the crap knocked out of them from their baptized husband. That's abuse, domestic abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. Watchtower, let's talk about that. Psychological abuse. Armageddon's coming. If you don't go out in service, you're going to be blood guilty, and that's going to be on your hands when Armageddon comes. That is all abuse, and that comes from Watchtower. It comes from the dysfunction of the organization. It comes from the dysfunction of families that have that going on before they ever became witnesses or while they're witnesses. A lot of dysfunction. So there's abuse, there's neglect, and there's traumatic experiences. You have a child who's sexually abused, that's extremely, extremely serious, as we know. And that child, unfortunately, always feels like the shame is on them. It's a toxic shame. It's like in their DNA. They carry that through the rest of their life until they can get help. So we want to be able to address that. Another cause for toxic shame is criticism and judgment. Maybe, Rich, you might want to touch on how Watchtower creates that in people's lives, that toxic shame.
Well, they do it in a number of different ways. And a lot of it's done from the platform with, disfellowshipping, or it's done with public reproof, or even private reproof. Even though it's private, you still feel, I'm not good enough, I'm shameful, I'm a sinner, I'm rotten. These wonderful elders have to correct me, and you're taking time away from their families, and I'm such a degenerate. And that's the way they make you feel. Mm-hmm. I know when I was public reproof for immorality, my two boys was, I didn't hide it. I mean, I told the elders, and so they found it appropriate for them to public reprove me. My two boys are sitting there, they start crying. Mm-hmm. I felt horrible.
Worthless, huh, Rich?
Oh, I couldn't tell you how bad I felt. I was already in depression. Now I even went into deep depression. Mm-hmm. And another thing that you have to realize is guilt is the number one cause for depression. And it's the number one cause for suicide. Mm-hmm. You got to keep that in your mind. So with me, when they did this after they did that, I really got to feeling guilt, and I got involved in masochism, which I confessed to the elders. They considered that immorality, and they considered it. I would definitely tell this audience all the details, but there is a woman, she's deceased now, that I promised her I would never, put it out there. So I won't. But because I always used to feel weird when somebody would say that I was sexually abused. Well, what does that mean? Were you raped? Were you gang raped? Or did someone just slap your fanny? I mean, it's such a wide spectrum. But like I said, I wouldn't mind telling the audience, but I made a promise long ago, and I'm going to keep it. But anyway, I got into masochism, which is a lot easier on the body than suicide, because that's where I was going. And when they said, well, when I told them what I did, I said, okay, well, that's homosexuality, so you're queer. I'm not homosexual.
And it's not.
And it's because they don't know.
They're ignorant.
The one who said
They're
that
very ignorant.
had a 10th grade education.
Yeah, they're very ignorant.
Had a 10th grade
They
education.
don't even know what it is.
So there is no way when you announce to a congregation that, I mean, these are your closest friends, and a lot of these brothers I worked with, when you confess stuff like that, your whole life changes. The way you feel about yourself changes. The way your children feel about you changes, because the esteem that your children have at ages 10 and 13, which mine were, is all wrapped up into who their parents are. If your father's a ministerial servant, he's out leading the congregation, he's giving talks, he's doing all JW stuff, you're proud of your father. Then when an elder gets up and says, Brother Borghi's been disfellowshipped, I remember this to this day. I brought my family. I wasn't going to hide from my sins. But it absolutely, after the disfellowshipping, I was really into a suicide mode. I've expressed this many times on 6 screens. I don't want to take up too much of Connie's time, because she did a lot of good research on that. Telling a story I've told a number of times, but I was suicidal. And if it wasn't that my Harley Davidson got stolen, I'd be dead today. And that's because of the Watchtower, their doctrines, their policies. And I would wish
toxic shame.
And toxic shame.
Toxic shame. That's a perfect example of toxic shame.
And
because the whole world has just disintegrated.
And I wish someone could tell me, by making an announcement that I've been disfellowshipped, how that protects the congregation, or how it makes the congregation keep Jehovah's Holy Spirit in it. It's just ludicrous, but I believed everything. At one time, I believed everything that came from the Watchtower came from Jehovah. And now I find out years later that almost everything comes out of the Watchtower, comes from Satan, the devil. He does appear as an angel of light, but this organization is corrupt. Anyway, enough of me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I would like to just, and I thank you for that, Rich. I'd like to just say something. Now, we need to clarify, there's a difference between healthy shame and toxic shame. Now, what Rich just described with his own personal example of being disfellowshipped and how that made him feel and that whole situation, that's toxic shame. Healthy shame, let's just be sure we're real clear here, because people might think, well, then you're saying that shame is wrong? No. So let me clarify that. Healthy shame is a feeling that arises after a specific behavior or action, often prompting reflection or change. Do you have an example of that, Rich?
Yeah.
Of a healthy shame.
If you say something to somebody and it's kind of on the mean side, and then you think about later what you said, and shame comes over, or guilt comes over. Sometimes they're synonymous. And you go to that person and say, I said this to you yesterday, and it was a stupid thing that I said, and I'm ashamed of myself. I'm sorry. Will you accept that apology? And if they do, wonderful. Everything is cool. But that's how shame, when you think about something you've done wrong.
Yeah, that's a healthy shame.
That's a healthy shame.
So you realize you did something wrong, not at the time, but afterwards you think about it and thought, oh, wow, I should not have said that or done that. Okay, it could be an action, of course. And then what you do is you reflect on it and you say, well, I need to work on that. I need to really watch my lips. I need to watch my tongue. I need to watch my behavior. And next time I'll do better. That's a healthy shame. But toxic shame, which is what we're discussing tonight, That's very deep. Toxic shame is a pervasive and chronic feeling. When something's chronic, it progressively gets worse and worse and worse. Like a patient who's chronic, their health just continues to deteriorate and drops lower, lower, lower on their baseline. So that's what toxic shame is. It's a pervasive and chronic feeling, and it relates to a person's entire self-worth, okay? Not just a portion of it, not just one incident. It's your whole entire self-worth of how you feel about yourself. Okay, so let's go back and recap what we said. We've just defined toxic shame, and we've also explained one of the causes is trauma. The second one now is criticism and judgment, which is what you just said, Rich, okay? And then there's a third cause of toxic shame, and that is social isolation. It's where one feels isolated or disconnected from others, and that can intensify their feelings of shame and inadequacy. Being disfellowshipped is a perfect example of that. The organization knows exactly what they're doing when it comes to toxic shame. They say it's designed so that it keeps the congregation clean. No, it's not keeping the congregation clean, because a lot of people who are disfellowshipped, sometimes if they choose to come back into the organization, they do come back. They jump through all the hoops for that. But then they look at the organization completely differently. And not only that, Rich, but then the brothers and sisters, they never treat you the same.
No.
Once a person's been disfellowshipped, we should have a show on that. When you're disfellowshipped and you go through all the hoops just to be reinstated, you're never, ever treated the same like you were when you first came in before when you got baptized.
They keep a record.
They keep a record, and
It's in the files.
and there's always the gossip mill, all the elderettes talking behind everyone's back and everybody else, and you are never, ever treated the same. So there's that isolation. Here's where you feel like, oh, I'm back in with, good graces on Jehovah's side, and Jehovah loves me, and I'm going to be loved by the brothers and sisters. It's not at the same level. It's not. So what people do is they internalize that. They internalize that emotion, and now they're split. Their mind tells them one thing, their heart tells them the other. Their mind's telling them, I came back to Jehovah and I should be accepted. But then their heart's saying, yeah, but I'm not feeling loved by the brothers and sisters like I was before. I'm still being judged. I'm still being shamed. It's volumes. Sometimes the nonverbal, I've always said that. You watch, it's not necessarily what people say. That is one thing that's important. Watch the nonverbal communication that people speak. Just watch their actions. And many times it speaks volumes over what they can verbally speak. Okay, so those are the three causes: trauma, criticism and judgment, and social isolation. And that social isolation, Rich, which we know there are people here on listening in tonight. Maybe they've been disfellowshipped and they feel like they don't have a friend in the world. The organization wants them to feel like they're scum of the earth and that Jehovah doesn't love them anymore, and that they're absolutely worthless. That's why there's such a high rate of suicides in the organization. So we're trying to help you to understand the psychology behind this evil cult. And they are doing this intentionally. Don't think that this is by accident, okay? It is done intentionally. Why? Because it's all about manipulation and control. They have to do everything they can to control you. And as long as they control you, they still have the numbers going on in the organization, which means there's still going to be money coming through and they're still going to be prosperous. Once you wake up to the games that Watchtower is playing, especially the psychological one of like toxic shame, and you wake up that you realize everything that we're saying is very true. And of course, do your own research as well. You will wake up and you will have to really determine whether or not you want to continue to be a part of this cult or not. Okay, so then there's symptoms and consequences. Should we go into that next, Rich? Okay, so you might think, well, give me some symptoms or examples of exactly what toxic shame is. Okay, well, it's like I said, it's a feeling of worthlessness and inadequacy. This is probably, the next one's probably one of the best ways I can describe it. It's known as self-loathing. It's where you absolutely hate yourself. You detest yourself. It's not just having low self-esteem and low self-confidence. That's part of it. It's where you absolutely hate yourself. It's self-hatred. Can I give you an example? I'll give you an example. When people are at this psyche, this point of their mental illness, sometimes you will see that they will take a razor. This is common among young teenage girls, early 20s. There's so much pressure for the young people today when they're in school to be so perfect and everything else. But social media plays into this. But you will see they'll take a razor blade and they'll slice their wrists. That happened to my great niece. And, that's very serious when that kind of behavior is going on. It's a self-loathing. Another example of that, and this is really common, has to do with eating disorders. Eating disorders are directly related to sexual abuse. There's so much shame that's internalized that they feel like they're totally worthless. They hate themselves. Not only they're the victim, but they feel like they were the cause of the rape or the molestation, which they weren't. I don't care if they were a teenager. I don't care if they were a child or whatever. They're a victim. It was the perpetrator that did this to them. But someone who has toxic shame, they hate themselves, and they will get to not just sexual abuse. It can be all kinds of abuse. It can be, like I said, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. It can be a lot of them. And what happens is that, especially young girls, teenagers, we're talking about 13, 14, 15, right in there, they get into eating disorders like anorexia nervosa, okay, or bulimia. Anorexia, like Karen Carpenter. Oh boy, I love Karen Carpenter's voice with the Carpenters, but she died from anorexia. And it's where there's a lot going on in a person's psyche who has an eating disorder, but it's where they loathe themselves so much that their identity of who they are, they starve themselves. And yet in their own mind, they don't think that they are starving themselves. They think they are perfectly fine. My mom was anorexic. My mom, when she died, she was 5'10" and she was 79 pounds. And yet my mom thought she was perfectly healthy, and she wasn't. 5'10" and she was 79 pounds. She looked like an Auschwitz victim in the concentration camps. Mm-hmm. And that's what self-loathing does, and toxic shame. Okay. So, and that's anorexia. Okay. Bulimia is where they overeat and then they, put their fingers down the throat and they start throwing up. Anyway, and all of these eating disorders are extremely, extremely dangerous. My friend, she was not a witness, but it was her only daughter. I'll just say briefly. Her name was Nikki. Nikki was brilliant. She had a bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley. I'm from California. And it was in molecular cell biology. She was brilliant. She was a straight A student also. And she had issues with regards to anorexia. And anyway, she died at the age of 27 from anorexia. And her mom, who's a very close friend of mine, took her to 9 different hospitals to deal with eating disorders. Back then in the day, they were $150,000 each. My friend couldn't afford it, but her parents could. They lived in Hillsborough, and just wrote the check. And she still died, and she died from a heart attack. So what we're talking about, this toxic shame, is extremely serious, and it also exists in the JW community. Okay, another symptom or consequence of toxic shame is a difficulty in forming healthy relationships. You might want to say something about that, Rich?
I'll pass.
You want to pass on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have,
we can talk.
Yeah.
We can talk about Joe.
Yeah, let's talk about Joe. Maybe Joe's on the air.
Joe might be on the air. He was an elder for 14 years, and the Watchtower really messed up his mind, and
Pretty much born in.
pretty much born in. And what he's told us, and we talk to him weekly, sometimes more than that. And I said, I have no friends. I have no friends because, the Watchtower was his life, and he got this fellowship for something he didn't really do. And he's been torturing himself for years.
Well, plus the judicial committee meetings. He has nightmares over that.
Yeah.
He has such a beautiful heart. He never really wanted to disfellowship anyone, but being an elder, there's that good old boys club. You got to conform.
Well, you got to go along with the others.
That's right.
There was a brother in my judicial committee who didn't want to disfellowship me. So the presiding overseer got rid of him and placed another brother in there.
There you go. There's the politics.
There's the politics.
Yeah. But after you leave the organization, or even if you don't leave the organization, okay, let's just look at both sides of the spectrum. JWs, they formulate their own friends based on who's at the Kingdom Hall, right? Who are the brothers and sisters that are at the Kingdom Hall? Those are your friends, instant friends. And especially if you're born in, witnesses don't have the social skills in life in so many aspects. One of them is to make new friends. They just don't. So when they leave the organization, they're at a loss. It's very difficult because they don't have those people skills. It's like whoever's at the Kingdom Hall, those are your friends, and that should suffice. But when you get out in the real world, you don't associate with worldly people. You're just so isolated. You're insular in that sense, and you're just in that little bubble.
Yeah,
that's not the real world.
I can relate to that because when I was in the military, most of the audience saw I spent 4 years in the Marines. You're on base. You wear the same uniform as everybody else. You obey the same rules as everybody else. Yeah. And then when you go home on leave or something, you're a fish out of water. You're a fish in a tree.
It's a totally different world.
Yes, you can't. It takes a while to relate to civilian life or doing things in a civilian way.
Right. And so the JWs are the same way. So maybe we might stop right now and just see if anyone has any comments.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Star 6. How do you feel about your psyche when you're in the Watchtower?
Or anything that we've said, anything you'd like to add to, or any comments, please come on, Star 6, and we'd love to hear your comments.
I have a question.
Yep. Hi, Susan.
Hi, honey. Now, toxic shame. You're saying toxic shame, correct?
Toxic shame. Yes.
I had a point. Okay. Is that similar? I mean, is PTSD different, the same, or part of this?
No, it's different.
Yeah, PTSD is another diagnosis of mental illness.
It's with PTSD, something will trigger a very unpleasant memory from the past. And with the shame that Connie's addressing, that is something that stays with you. It's something the Watchtower does to you, and you're always living in that shame. It's consistent day in and day out shame. Every time you go to the Kingdom Hall, well, I was disfellowshipped once, or I was publicly reproved once, or I can't get any privileges for the next 5 years, because I smoked a cigarette or whatever. I committed a sin. Like, we're all sinners, but hope that answers your question, Sue.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, then I'll just continue on. But we would like to hear of other people.
Yes, excuse me.
Go ahead, brother.
All right. Can you hear me fine?
Yeah, we sure can.
Yes. Okay, good. And so I remember when I, was a teenager, growing up as a witness, and we attended many social functions, and we did a lot of stuff with different friends and things with the young ones and everything. But I remember not knowing how I'm supposed to act. And people would tell me, just be yourself, and I never knew how to be myself. And when I finally left, when I was 18, it was quite it was difficult. Well, it wasn't really difficult making friends because I basically watched what other people did and tried to mirror the things that other people thought were good and cool, and so I really didn't learn how to be myself until I was, it took several years, trial and error, and realizing, hey, I don't really like this. I don't agree with this, and I don't want to be this. And it was pretty tough, and I don't know if I ever would have come around to that if I stayed a witness. I wouldn't have been exposed to so many different types of people and different personalities. Everybody around me as a witness is being fake. They're just saying and doing what they know they can and get away with. And if they happen to open up to express any concern, they knew that there were no secrets. So it was really hard to actually have true friends.
Yeah.
Just wonder, there must be other people that felt the same way.
Yeah.
Just like people say, be yourself. I don't know how to be myself because I don't know myself.
Right. Witnesses generally don't know how to be themselves because it's all about a performance.
Yep.
It's all
Image.
about image and performing and putting on that smile and putting in that time and going out in service and studying. It's all a big performance act. And it's, everybody's judging everyone in the congregation. The elders are watching everybody. The elders' wives, everybody's watching everyone. And so when you're a young person, growing up, whether you're a witness or not, there's some real basic needs for a young person. They want to be approved. They want their parents' approval. They want their teachers' approval. And as far as parents are concerned, they want their parents' love. So that's deep. Kids will do whatever to have their parents' approval and their love. But then as they get older, and when I say older, I'm talking about in their teens, they start to see things going on in the organization that they don't approve of or they don't agree with, like say just fellowshipping, for example. It's like, oh my gosh, this was my friend. And all of a sudden, maybe he smoked or she smoked or, got drunk or whatever. Now they're just fellowship and I can't talk to them. And yet I still care about this person. And so they start to question things and they start to gain their independence. And, that's all part of growing up. But it is a challenge, especially for anyone that's been in a high control cult group, because a cult is an organization that just controls your mind. Everything that you think, everything you say, everything that you do from the time you're born until you die. And, it is extremely challenging to be able to leave a cult, but it's definitely possible, and you can leave very successfully. And that's why we have these conversations, to be able to help people to really understand that it's an organization like Watchtower that inculcates toxic shame. And that's why so many JWs have very low self-esteem. And me, I'm all about a college education. Go for it. Go for the stars. I did it myself, worked full-time, went to school at night, and it wasn't easy, but I did it, and I graduated with honors with a couple of degrees. And let me tell you, anybody can do it if you want it bad enough. And the thing is, Watchtower does not want you to get an education of any kind, because you will be able to develop your self-esteem, and you will develop your self-confidence, and you will develop critical thinking skills. And you will be able to think outside of Watchtower's box, and you won't be mortified with the fear, the guilt, and the shame that Watchtower uses to manipulate and control your life. Until you can wake up from that, you won't ever wake up. You'll be that sleepy giant, right? That's always sleeping. But unfortunately, you're not living a life of happiness and joy that God really gave you. He gave you a purpose in life, and it's certainly not to be in so much bondage and darkness that Watchtower has created in your life, and especially mentally. So we thank you, brother, so much for that comment. The other thing I wanted to go back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi,
Hello?
this is Apostle.
Possibly.
Oh,
Hello.
hi. So when I was listening to Borghi talk about how hard it was for him to assimilate into society as a civilian, that is exactly what we go through when we leave the organization. And I believe that's called institutional syndrome. Is that correct? Would you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, institutionalized. The same thing with the prisoners in prison. Once they get released, they want to go back to jail because that's where they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
That's where they're accepted.
Their comfort zone.
Yeah, the comfort zone.
Some of us will go back to the Lord. Very much like that. And it's not like or back into an abusive relationship.
Right.
We were isolated, we were talked down to, all these things that the organization did to us. It was abusive.
Yeah.
Especially with shame.
Very true.
And doesn't it create a trauma bond?
Yep.
And make us even more like Stockholm Syndrome, where we actually have compassion for our perpetrators, our abusers?
Right.
Yeah, that's well said, Pastor Babe. It is the Stockholm Syndrome.
Yep.
Very much so.
And Watchtower loves that.
Yep.
Because they use that scripture, when a dog vomits, we're going to do return to your vomit. Watchtower's got an answer for everything. And it's all designed to manipulate and control you and to bring you right back. Armageddon's just around the corner. So, you better come back to Jehovah, so you don't die at Armageddon.
You're always in a fishbowl. They look what color shirt you're wearing, how long your sideburns are, how many doors on your car. I had a situation. I just thought of it. I bought this house right next to the Kingdom Hall, actually, and it had a crucifix on the doorpost. So because, according to the JW world, Jesus died on a torture stake and not a crucifix. I took it down, but the house was painted yellow, but it had faded. So when you walk up my steps, you could see where the crucifix was, the indentation. I got a phone call. You should paint over that.
Yeah, they got an answer for everything.
Oh, and by the way, you should cut your grass. Well, I'm working 70 hours a week and making the meetings. Well, anyway.
Everyone has to give you their opinion, even if you didn't ask for it. That was one thing I hated about being a witness. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to go back. Thank you, Linda, for those comments. I'd like to go back just one thing about difficulty forming healthy relationships. There's a fear of vulnerability and rejection leading to the withdrawal and avoidance. We certainly know what rejection is all about, especially if you do something wrong in the organization. If you're not perfect, or, if you're disfellowshipped, or even if you disassociate yourself like I did, there's that rejection. And nobody wants rejection, but Watchtower is all about that. So, this mindset inside the organization is just ingrained in us. And so when somebody is a JW and they leave the organization, they have a difficulty forming these healthy relationships. Why is that? Because they're afraid of rejection. And why are they afraid of rejection? They're afraid of rejection because they have very low self-esteem, and they have this toxic shame that Watchtower has instilled in them. So it's very challenging for them to develop healthy relationships. And it's just another thought that I'd like to bring up. Watchtower, you will never hear Watchtower say this, okay? You will never hear Watchtower say this. I've said it a couple times on the show. But one thing is, God says to love your neighbor as yourself, okay? Love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, to love yourself, you have to have a healthy self-esteem. You have to have
Self-respect.
self-esteem, self-confidence. You have to feel good about yourself, not just like yourself. You have to love yourself in a very healthy way. And most JWs don't have that. And so in order to love other people, in order to be, a really well-balanced person in life, it all starts with you. It's how you look at your life, how you feel about yourself. Do you have self-confidence? Do you have self-esteem? Do you love yourself in a healthy way? Because you cannot love other people in life. I don't care who they are, what religion, what race, what nationality, whatever. You cannot love other people in a healthy way unless you love yourself first. And that's how it works. That's why God says to love your neighbor as yourself. But you will never hear Watchtower teach that one, okay? Because they don't want you to have a healthy love for yourself. Yes, go ahead. Is that you, Stefan? Hello?
Starship.
Yeah. They keep telling you that you're a good for nothing slave. You're a good for nothing slave. How can you have self-esteem when you're a good for nothing slave?
Right.
And so if you are to love other people like you love yourself, then they're good for nothing slaves. So people, that doesn't even make sense. Everybody's good for nothing.
Right. You're nothing more
Does that
than
make sense to you?
for them. They're telling you right in front of your face exactly what you think of you. That you're nothing better than a slave for them to serve their purposes. Look at the slaves who are out in the plantation.
Yeah.
They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they had no power, they had no voice. They were just treated like animals, which was absolutely disgusting. And yet, they were slaves. And it was the plantation owners that had all the power, had all the control, didn't want them to learn to read, write, God forbid. So look at Watchtower. They tell people, you are nothing but a good for nothing slave. But, oh, God forbid, please be sure and give us your money, your donations, and help us with the worldwide work and, building up Warwick and creating. Oh, yeah, it's all about Watchtower and their purposes at your expense. Yep. Okay. So then the other thing I'd like to say is, let's see, we're talking about toxic shame, the symptoms and the consequences. I'd like to go into talking about mental health challenges. There's an increased risk of depression, which we've talked about before, but we'll touch on it again tonight. Depression is huge among the JWs, and don't fool yourself that it isn't, because it is. There are so many JWs that are popping those antidepressant and anti-anxiety pills. They're popping it like candy. It's not even funny.
Many elders are getting drunk quite often during the week.
Yeah.
They come home from a elders meeting or whatever, and they drink.
Yeah.
Because the pressure is just too much.
Yeah.
And they don't like themselves because they have
there's no outlet. They have no hobbies or anything, Rich.
That's it. They don't have time.
They don't have
They
time.
can't go to the golf
life.
course or shoot some baskets or, play a little hockey or go skiing or something.
Or what about vacations? I mean, I never heard of any witnesses that ever went on vacations
Without finding the closest Kingdom Hall.
or or the assemblies.
Yeah.
Whoop-de-doo. That was their vacation. That's not a vacation. That's work.
For years, my circuit used to have a big district assembly up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
We rented the same cottages every single year from the same people.
Yeah.
That's where I had 2 weeks vacation.
Yeah.
I spent 1 week up there.
Yeah. And then when you're working, you can't wait to have your vacation. I mean, my gosh, that's 40 hours right there, 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
That's 40 hours that you've earned, to be able to have a week. But even after that, 1 week beyond that, that's not even enough when you're working full time year after year.
And just a little something on the happiness that people have.
Yes.
When I we used to have a circuit assembly in Providence, Rhode Island. And I would go down there, and I knew Providence pretty well because I was stationed in Quonset Point, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So I went to Providence quite a bit. Mm-hmm. There was a liquor store not that far, almost walking distance from the circuit assembly. Mm-hmm. I thought I'd get on there and maybe get a 6-pack.
Yeah.
I had to wait in line like you wouldn't believe. They had all the JW guys. They got their their badges,
Oh, wow.
put them in their shirt pocket,
Oh,
and they
my.
were buying a bottle of this, a bottle of that, or
Yeah.
a 6-pack, and so
Yeah.
forth.
Well, they're
Yeah.
walking in with the suit, so it's quite obvious that they're at the convention, right?
Yeah,
Even
well,
though they took their name tags off.
Yeah, they took them off.
Yeah, right.
Threw their took their coat off and their necktie off, and
Yeah,
went in there and bought a bottle.
yeah. That's their coping mechanism. It
Mhm.
sure is. And even among the women too. There's a lot of alcoholism, men and
Yeah.
women. Okay, so that's the mental health issues, depression, anxiety. That's huge among JWs because, see, they always have to put on this performance that we are the happiest people in the world when they really are not. It's just putting on a show. It's just a mask that they always have to pretend that they're the happiest people when deep down inside, their psyche is saying, there's something really, really wrong. I am so depressed. I can't get out of this depression, this dark hole. And yet, it just never, ever goes away. Okay. All right. So then the other point I'd like to bring out about symptoms and consequences of toxic shame, like what you said, Rich, it can be engaging in substance abuse,
Mhm.
eating disorders, which I mentioned earlier, and self-harm. Self-harm can be, using the razor blade to slice your wrists and so forth.
Yeah,
Cutting. They call it
masochism.
cutting, masochism. There's a lot of different ways that people act out, and it's just their coping mechanism with toxic shame, but it's a very unhealthy way to cope. So that's common. And even overeating, eating disorders. I mentioned anorexia and I mentioned bulimia. Overeating is an eating disorder. I mean, we had sisters in our congregation that dealt with overeating. They weren't dealing with any pills or alcoholism, but they were definitely overeaters in their 20s. I'd say they were a good, 50 to 100 pounds overweight. You're in your 20s, So, okay. And the last point with regards to symptoms and consequences is perfectionism. Oh my gosh, how this is so true among JWs. When I was temporary pioneering, auxiliary pioneering, you're out in service with sisters who are regular pioneers. There was this one sister, she thought she was the queen bee of regular pioneering. She thought she was so perfect. And this other sister that I was very close to she was really, she was born in as a JW, but she was very frustrated because she couldn't be perfect like this regular pioneer, And I said, well, don't even try to be perfect. That perfection is a mental illness just in itself, because
Nobody can be perfect.
Nobody can be perfect, and you will never ever attain to that level. You can just do the very best that you can, but Watchtower does that. Oh, be like the regular pioneers, get the time in, and be the ones always commenting and giving the talks on it was the Thursday night meetings and so forth. So that issue of perfectionism is a real problem, and it attempts to control this is the point. Perfectionism, it attempts to control the shame by striving for perfection and avoiding mistakes. Okay, did you hear that?
And when you can't achieve perfection, depression.
Right. And the thing is,
anxiety.
In your mind, in your psyche, okay, there's that toxic shame. And yet you're saying to yourself, well, if I could only be perfect, then that way, if I can strive for perfection and avoid the mistakes, then I can control the shame. That's the purpose. They're trying to control the shame, because the shame is like this monster that just keeps rising up,
I hope the audience
inside them.
Hope the audience is paying attention to that. Can you review that, Father, one more time?
About the whole issue, all of it?
No,
Rich? just perfectionism?
The last part.
Okay, so perfectionism is an attempt to control shame by striving for perfection and avoiding mistakes. So the issue is they've got this monster inside of them of this toxic shame, and they're trying to, suppress it. They're trying to control it. And they think, if I can just control the shame that's inside of me, then I won't have to deal with the toxic shame. I've eliminated the problem. But so how they go about doing that is to strive for perfection. And so there's no mistakes, because if I'm perfect, then nobody will know that I've got this toxic shame inside of me. I'm looking on the outside like I'm just Miss Perfect or Mr. Perfect in the congregation, and I've got my whole life together, when deep down inside I don't. But if I'm perfect, if I can just be perfect in everything that I do, then I can control that toxic shame. A lot of actors is what I'm saying. There's a lot of acting going on in the Kingdom Hall. Okay. And the rank and file, they're not even privy to what's going on with the elders, ministerial service. But let's talk about the elders, okay? Because they think they're just so perfect. Oh my gosh, they're an elder and they've got it all together. No, they don't. Okay. No, they don't. We have heard of stories of physical fights, altercations, physical fights, even swearing like crazy, that, has happened. Our friend Joe was an elder for
fist fights.
Oh yeah. So no, they're not perfect by any means. They're just human beings. So the elders are not perfect. The circuit overseers, the governing body, let's go all the way up to the top. There's toxic shame from the top down in any corporation. Okay. All right. So those are the symptoms and the consequences. Feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy, self-loathing, difficulty forming healthy relationships, mental health challenges, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and perfectionism. Okay, would anybody like to call in? Because the next part is how one can overcome toxic shame. But we'd love to hear your comments at this point. Anyone, *6?
We know you're out there, *6. Anyone out there been disfellowshipped?
Well, let me come in here, Dick. This is Rick here at the 6-screen control panel. Yeah, what's fascinating here is so many of these things that are known in the psychological world. Psychiatrists, counselors of all types study these things, and the Watchtower must study them too, because they know how to really put a person into mental illness. Seriously.
Yeah.
We know, in fact, we had Dr. Jerry Bergman on our program numerous times in the past, and he was a psychiatrist at one time for the Watchtower. And he said that Jehovah's Witnesses have a mental illness rate that is 4 times higher than any other religion. And that's a fact. You can check it online and see it. And other studies have been done too, not just by Dr. Bergman, but another psychiatrist. I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, but he said the same thing. So the cults understand psychology.
Yeah.
They really do. And they know what works and they know what doesn't work. But they know these little secrets. They know the things you've been studying there, Constance and Dick, that really work to manipulate people. And the Watchtower uses this. It's really a shame what an evil organization, when they know it can really hurt people. And I think in terms of, I brought this up so many times on the 6 screens. I think one of the most hurtful things in the world is for an organization or anyone to deliberately break a family apart.
What?
That is the essence of life. Having family, having people that are of your sort, and for the Watchtower to come down the pike and deliberately disconnect you from your family and from your friends.
Right.
That is evil. And they know that works. That's what keeps people in the Watchtower.
Yeah.
That's why you have so many PMOs today, people on the fringe, people on the edge that are saying, geez, I want to leave, but if I do, I'm cooked. No one's going to speak to me. So the Watchtower knows these very things, Constance and Dick, that you guys are speaking about here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Yeah, it's very, very true. And the other thing I was going to say in terms of this, we'll get into overcoming toxic shame. But what I would like to say is one of the avenues is seeking professional help, because therapy can provide a very safe space and be able to help you process the root causes of toxic shame. You know how the Bible always talks about get to the very root, like the root of the tree, get to the root of the problem. Well, that's what a therapist is designed to do, is to help you get to the root causes of what exactly is causing your toxic shame. And I was friends, we're friends on Facebook, but that's pretty much it. She lives in a different state. Anyway, she was fourth or fifth generation, I think fourth generation. And anyway, she was married to an elder, married for 25 years, endured a lot of domestic violence. He was a baptized brother. This is another sister that I knew. And anyway, she was an elderette, born and raised, and that's all she knew. And anyway, she got disfellowship just to get out of the marriage, which we know how that works. And she was going to a counselor. She was going to a professional counselor. And she told me this whole story, which I found so very interesting. And she said, now, when you're a counselor, when you're a therapist, everything's confidential. You cannot mention people's names or anything of that sort. But in generalities, you can say things. You just have to be very careful what you say. Anyway, this is my point. So this gal, she's going to this therapist and she's getting help. She's disfellowship. She wants to deal with these issues that she's having to deal with Watchtower. And anyway, found out, you know how Watchtower doesn't believe in any professional therapist. God forbid you go outside the organization to get professional help. Well, there's a reason for that, because Watchtower still wants to manipulate and control you, and they don't want to lose you. Okay, they don't want you to realize they're the problem causing your issues of mental health. But this is my point. This sister told me, she said, I said, good for you for going to a therapist. Good for you. I'm really proud of you for that. Is it helping? Oh, yeah, it's helping. And this is what she told me that I wanted to share with you. This therapist that she was seeing had, because it was all revolved around JW stuff. This therapist said to her, she says, I have a lot of clients who are Jehovah's Witnesses, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, not who were Jehovah's Witnesses. It's who are present tense, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're seeing me. So I think that, I thought that was great, because, in the organization, they teach you just to pray more, to study more, to go out and service more, to go to all the meetings. And, that just creates more stress. What a person needs is professional help to be able to get to the root cause of these issues.
And when you talk about professional help, you have to find a psychiatrist or a psychologist that is a Christian person. I attended a course for quite a while on divorce care, and they were all professional marriage counselors that all had graduated from what's the word I'm looking for?
You're talking about the ministry?
No, they all graduated from seminary. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, seminary.
So they were professional, and they were also spiritual.
That's nice.
So you've got to find a lot of these psychologists out there don't know how it worked, how these cults how these cults work. So find one like Rick alluded to, Jerry Bergman, or call Jerry Bergman up and ask him if he knows anybody in your area that you could see.
Well, I know a sister down in San Diego area.
For right now, if you can't afford a psychologist or psychiatrist, 6 greens is pretty good.
Yes,
because we dig into the deeper stuff.
Yes, we do.
And we let people explain how they feel about it. It's cathartic. And I know I was in therapy for about 10 years with the stuff that I endured in Vietnam. And they made us keep on talking about it and keep on. And it's like, I already know this guy's story. I already know this guy's story. How do you feel? How do you feel? But what you realize after 5 or 6 years of doing this, you're a lot better off. You can sleep at night. You don't wake up tense and ready to fight the world.
Right.
Because you kept on talking about it. So with me and Connie, we're planning on doing a lot on the psychological side of being a Jehovah's Witness. In the olden days, we would talk about was Jesus crucified, disfellowshipping, the blood issue. Yeah, there's so many things that are particularly JW, but I think, with Connie's background, she's a legitimate psychologist, we can help people. We can help people, and just be careful on who's giving you help. So there are a lot of people out there that are not certified and don't know what they're talking about, and they just, sputtering along saying what they think is right.
Yeah.
You need people that are trained
Yeah.
trained in this or have a deep experience with it.
Right. And the thing is, people might not understand. A psychiatrist is someone who has 12 years of university training plus an additional 4 to 6. So he has like about 16 years of training as a medical doctor. But a psychiatrist, who I'm talking about, their mode of operation is basically writing out scripts. They'll listen to you, and it's to give you a prescription of Valium, lithium, whatever the medication is for the mental illness that he or she diagnoses you. Okay, but a psychologist or a therapist is different than that. Theirs is primarily just counseling without giving you any medication. Okay, so that's the difference between the two, just to let you know. Okay.
Groups can really be helpful too.
Oh yeah, self-help groups.
Self-help groups,
like the 12 steps with AA or NA.
Right.
There's a lot of power. Don't underestimate this. There is a lot of power in coming together as a group of people, however many people are, like here on the show or in a group, whatever, and just to be able to speak your truth, and people don't crosstalk. Okay, you'll see it in 12 steps. Somebody will say something and everybody shuts their mouth and they're quiet and they listen. They don't ever crosstalk. That's a real no-no in these 12 steps, because it takes a lot of courage, first of all, for people to show up. They're scared. They're not sure what to expect. And excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. And it takes a lot of courage to be able to speak up. And when they speak up, they don't want someone cross-talking over them, which means talking over them and interrupting them. So anyway, there's a lot of power that can be said about people coming together on this show or 12 steps to speak their truth. And it's healing. That's the point. It's healing. They might not know one another. They don't, for the most part, but they have a commonality. There's a common denomination. And that's they're an alcoholic, or they've got a drug issue, or they're a sex addict, or they're Gamblers Anonymous, or, they're Overeaters Anonymous, or they, came out of a cult. They're trying to deal with that. Yep. So there's a lot of healing that's out there. You don't have to spend a lot of money for this.
And when you get in groups, sometimes you get people to think they know everything. The idea is just to talk and be accepted. Sometimes you'll have if you have a professional group leader, like a psychologist, let him do his thing. He's trained. But there are a lot of people out there that didn't even graduate from junior high school that are going to act like they're experts, and they're going to tell you what to do because it makes their ego feel really good. You don't want to listen to those type of people. Do your own research. Get in a group, and just tell the group how you're feeling and thinking, and don't let one person in the group say, well, you know what you should do? Yeah, he's not trained. No, let the psychologist, who's running the group, let him conduct everything. He knows what he's doing.
Okay. So to overcome the toxic shame, there's 4 points. We've mentioned about seeking professional help. The other one is self-compassion. It's very, very important to learn to be kind to yourself and to be really understanding to yourself. I had a friend once say, I thought it was great. She's a registered nurse. We were talking about this years ago. And she said how important it is to become your best friend. And I love that. I thought that was really, really powerful because, if you have a best friend, you're always very kind and gentle, loving to that best friend. You don't want to do anything to compromise or endanger that friendship because it's very special to you. Well, the same thing should be true with yourself. Treat yourself with a lot of love and kindness and understanding because, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses in this cult or any other cults, it takes a lot. There's a lot. It's like an onion. There's layer after layer after layer after layer after layer that you're trying to sort out, you're trying to deal with. And it takes time. And you have to be very patient with yourself. And this is just another area of self-compassion. I know when I left, it was my choice to leave. But I'm telling you, it's a real challenge. There's no doubt about it. It takes a lot of courage. But when you're physically, mentally, emotionally just drained and you need to just lie down and just take a really good nap, 3 hours, whatever, turn the stupid phone off, okay? Forget the emails, the texts, phone calls. Turn the phone off and take care of yourself and go have a good nap because your body needs to recharge. Your battery does. Or, for women, go have a pedicure, go have a manicure, go have a facial, go have your hair done. I do it all the time. I love it. I'm a massage therapist as well. Oh man, do I love the Swedish massage, So, those are some things that you can do. Go take a walk, go to the gym, listen to some music. You don't have to spend any money. Turn on Spotify, whatever, turn on your favorite album, just have a good time, dance to the music, just get into the mode, just self-compassion is what it is. Talk to a friend on the phone, whatever. So self-compassion is very important.
Folks, if you're not happy,
Yeah.
if you're depressed, if you feel the need to drink or pop pills or overindulge in food or whatever, examine it through prayer.
Yeah.
And me and Connie are here to help, and there are other people that that are educated, that'll help you also.
Prayer is difficult for some people, Rich, because, they have so much anger towards the organization because the organization in Jehovah is one and the same.
Yep.
I was one of them. Okay. Don't talk to me about God. Don't talk to me about Jehovah. I don't want to talk about the Bible. Don't talk about religion, nothing. I had just shut down because I had felt so betrayed by this cult. But, you eventually, that was my case. That's not everyone's case. But the thing is what you will realize eventually, you really will, if you have a righteous heart, because being bitter is no way. You'll end up dying young. You'll end up coming down with cancer, and that's no way to die. But you will realize eventually that Almighty God, Yahweh, I'm going to call him Yahweh. Yahweh is totally separate from this organization.
Absolutely.
They're not one and the same. And once you really realize that, then you can start to develop, if you feel like it, when you're ready. You got to go at your own pace, but to be able to have a relationship with God, okay? But there's so much betrayal in this organization. That's very difficult for some people. Not everybody, but I'm just saying what Rich said is very, very true, because God truly loves each and every one of us, whether you're in this organization or not, okay? And what you have gone through, he truly loves you, and he does not hate you because you leave this organization, okay? That's a very demonic teaching that Watchtower has. So
it's certainly sick.
It's very sick.
We only have a few more minutes left.
Two more, honey. I want to mention two more
Okay,
things.
I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay, honey.
Mhm.
So anyway, there's two more thoughts here. The other thought, as far as overcoming toxic shame. Okay, we said self-compassion. Number 2, seeking professional help. Number 3 is challenging negative thoughts. Okay, I touched on this a little bit, but our mind is always telling us thoughts. Nobody talks to you more than what's going on in your mind, okay? And whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever. But if you have a negative thought, like the scripture says, right? Remember? Proverbs 23:7. For as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. So if you have all these negative thoughts going on in your head, okay, which is very common among JWs with the toxic shame, you want to be able to stop that. You have control over that. You can stop that thought immediately and reframe it. Stop the thought and turn it into something positive. And it's going to take some practice for you to do that, but you'll be amazed at how much reframing of that negative self-talk that you have to do in order to turn around this toxic shame. So the point is reframing negative self-talk and identifying and reframing the underlying beliefs. What? I'm a good for nothing slave. You know,
Always
I'm
keep in mind,
worthless.
I'm sorry, always keep in mind you're a child of God
Yes.
and God loves you. Don't believe the lie the Watchtower tells people
Right.
that if you've been disfellowshipped, you're an enemy of God. That's ludicrous. But you know what? A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses think that way, and that's why there's so many suicides.
Yep.
That's why there's so much drinking
Yep.
and
Popping pills.
popping pills, overeating. There's, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses live a double life. They're one thing at the Kingdom Hall
Yes.
and another thing at home.
Even elders, Rich.
Even, well, I've
Even
said it so
elders.
often. I worked
Even elders.
for a remodeling company. To get a job, you had to be an elder or a servant for this company. And all the subcontractors that we ever hired were all Jehovah's Witnesses. You should hear the arguments and the cursing. I mean, then you're at the Kingdom Hall. Oh, brother. Oh, sister, how are you? You look lovely. It's crazy.
It's all a mask.
It's a mask.
It's phony.
It's a mask.
It's a pretense.
Yeah.
Well, and we won't mention anyone's name, but we just recently met someone which was so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, he was an elder. And remember, he was watching porn?
Yep.
And then he was watching porn continuously.
And he had a part on the district convention.
The next day.
Yeah, next day.
The next day. And he was watching porn the night before.
Yeah.
Okay, but he's out of the organization now. But he was able to be honest with us. So don't think these elders are circuit overseers or governing body members or anything perfect, because they're not. Okay, and the last point I'd like to bring out is connecting connecting with supportive individuals in order to overcome this toxic shame. Okay, because we can talk about toxic shame as much as we want, but the purpose is to learn how to overcome it. So self-compassion, seeking professional help, challenging negative thoughts, and the last one is connecting with supportive individuals. You want to build relationships with people who are going to offer you empathy and validation. And validation and empathy are both very, very important, because then your voice is heard. You can speak your voice, your truth, and people can hear you and they can validate you and say, you're not crazy. You're not crazy. It's amazing that you live that kind of life and you were brought up in that, or you're involved with that cult. But you're not crazy. And there is a wonderful life out there where you can have a healthy relationship with yourself. First, it all starts with yourself, to learn to love yourself and to get rid of that shame and to be able to move on and to love other people and to move on in life and have a wonderful, healthy, productive, fulfilling life. And it is possible.
And I would say this to the audience. No church out there is perfect. There are some churches you definitely have to stay away from. But there are a lot of good churches that really try to do the right thing and say the right things and help people. I know that the church that we go to, if you went and said to the pastor, I get this kind of problem, that kind of problem, he's not going to form a judicial meeting and announce to the world that you're a sinner. They try to help you. My former church, it was Methodist, and it had its issues. Ordaining homosexuals, one of the issues they had. It divided the congregation right in half, actually. But other than that, it was a very warm, loving congregation. They helped people. There was life groups for everything.
That's wonderful. I really respect that.
They had life
That's
groups.
really needed.
They had life groups. If you're alcoholic, if you're drug addicted,
There's a lot of pornography in the churches.
a lot. If you're hooked on pornography, they had courses for that.
Yeah.
If you're into gambling, they had courses for
Or
that.
divorce.
And
Divorce, or
I
widows and widowers.
divorce care was
Yeah.
something that I taught
Yeah.
for a number of years at my church.
Yeah.
Um,
If you've lost your husband or your wife,
Yeah.
there's support groups for that.
Yeah.
Lost a child.
There
It's
are-
wonderful because people need help.
Jehovah's Witnesses
They don't do
have no
anything.
group. If you're in trouble, especially if you've committed a sin, the congregation feels that they have to spank you somehow to keep the congregation clean, whether it's private reproof, public reproof, disfellowshipping. They've got to do something because they don't allow sinners serious sin in the congregation. What is serious sin? Whatever the presiding overseer feels it is. Really.
Well, and the thing is with Watchtower, which is one thing I really can't stand, is they don't care if you get baptized at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, you're just a child, right? You're just an absolute child. And so you get baptized because, of course, you want mommy and daddy's approval and you want mommy and daddy's love. So, you do what makes them happy. And then you get to be a teenager, you're growing up, and then the hormones are changing. And, it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm interested in girls, or, oh, I'm interested in boys now, or whatever. And then things happen. And then now you're disfellowshipped. It's like, oh my gosh, kicked out of the house if you have Nazi JWs. And, it's so unfortunate because these children's lives are absolutely destroyed. They have no idea what they were getting themselves into. They were just children. And look at Jesus. Jesus didn't get baptized till he was 30.
That's right.
But Watchtower doesn't care. They want people in as early as they can.
Yeah.
What was that thing that they had something about? If you were 16, you need
Bring
to
your
be
driver's license.
Yeah, you need to be baptized by the time you're 16. Otherwise,
Your parents should not allow you to get a driver's license.
Right. Allow you to have a driver's license at 16 unless you're baptized. Now, you know what? That's insane. There's nowhere in the Bible that talks about that, but Watchtower is just nothing but a corporation trying to get more people in, which means more money. So it's really, really sad. And people are bamboozled from the get-go. You're set up for failure from the get-go. And I'm so happy to hear there's so many young people rich that are leaving. They're waking up, they're leaving. I'm not saying it's easy for them, especially, if they're at home with their parents. You have to have a plan. But, there is life outside of Watchtower and very successful life. You can make a wonderful life for yourself. Don't get caught up on this fear of Armageddon. Watchtower's been saying that forever with all their false prophecies. We're products of 1975, okay? And that was ages ago.
Yeah, 50 years ago.
Yeah, it sure was.
And now I can hear them right now from the platform. Brothers and sisters, Israel is being attacked, or Israel's attacking Iran, and that's the sign.
Yeah.
That's the sign.
Get everybody in a panic mode.
Yeah, get out in field service. Get out there. If Armageddon comes out in field service, you'll be protected. That's BS, but that's what they're selling. Star 6. We've been doing most of the talking tonight. Do you have any questions or any comments? Any kind of a comment that you might make?
Hello, this is Grace. I'm calling from Sweden.
Yes.
And the time is 2:50 in the Swedish night now. So
2:15.
I wanted to say something I have been thinking about a long time. I want to thank Dick and Constance Borghi for this show. I really like this show that you're having, and I watched several shows that I really enjoyed. And I have noticed, and it hasn't gone unnoticed for everybody, I think, that you have been filling in for Barbara Anderson and Eric if they couldn't have a show. And sometimes I know you're not always so healthy yourself. Maybe you have a slight cold or something, but you're still there like a military, always showing up, always ready to do your thing. And I just wanted to say it's not so easy. It looks easy to have a show, but it's not easy to be on a camera and talk and everything. And I just wanted to acknowledge that I really appreciate your show.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank
Well,
you, Grace.
thank you, Grace.
That's very kind of you.
It's particularly easy for me because I have such a wonderful wife, so supportive and brilliant. And, you know, she helps me along with this stuff. And because I've had a
We
20
help
years.
each other.
Yeah, well, you know.
Rich, it's a piece of cake for Rich. I do my research, so, but we complement each other, that's for sure. And we want to make sure it's something informative that people can really take information and really be able to utilize it. And to be able have it to be something practical they can use in their life right now. So we thank you, Grace. We always love your comments, love your accent. It's so adorable. Thank you, honey, so much for coming on tonight.
Star 6. We got a few more moments.
I just thought about this, about perfectionism. And, you know, latencies and English isn't my first language. So I noticed this about myself. If I can't find the perfect word, or sometimes I pronounce it not just perfect, then I get really annoyed at myself. So I think I suffer from a bit of perfectionism, actually. And you brought up some other things about Armageddon any minute, and that's just the thing for me, like every day, and I feel like God almost is watching me all the time, like, what are you doing? And I remember talking to an elder's wife, because I was this perfect Stepford person, woman, and you should have a little makeup, just modest clothes, and have a perfect home, baking cookies. I did all of that. And still, they wouldn't allow me to get baptized. And I remember I talked to an elder's wife, and I told her, it's like you are telling me I'm not good enough.
Exactly.
And I remember I was crying. I was absolutely heartbroken. And just the stress of it, because I couldn't figure out what is it they want me to do. I do my Bible study. I answer in the microphone at Kingdom Hall. I do everything I possibly can and more. And just the stress of this feeling like it was never good enough. I remember when I got home from Kingdom Hall, I was so stressed that because at Kingdom Hall you had to perform. And when I got home, the stress just overwhelmed me. I was so angry sometimes. I was just so angry, but then they couldn't see me, so I guess they didn't know about it. But I was just so angry, and it was the stress that caused it, and I felt like I was blowing up or something.
Yeah.
It was just horrible.
Well,
And,
you know,
I think this show is really good because we can start to heal and talk to each other about our experiences. And I really want to say that this show is important. Thank you.
Oh, thank you,
thank you,
sweetheart.
Grace.
Thank you. And you know, the thing is, Grace, I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure men feel like they have to be perfect, but in this culture in our world today, I don't care what country you're from, Sweden, here in America, all over, women think they have to be so perfect. And in the Watchtower world, oh my gosh, same thing. And the point I wanted to make in reference to what you said, Grace, was, you know, that was just one meeting. It goes on meeting after meeting after meeting after, I mean, it never, ever ends. And that just builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And people, you know, you get to a point with depression, anxiety, stress, burnout. You get to a point where it's like you either conform and the organization literally breaks you down from the inside out, okay? From the inside out, the mind, body, inside out. And you are just nothing but a performer, just performing, putting on that smile, going to the meetings, trying to act like everything is just peachy keen. And, you know, you are just the happiest witness in the world when deep down inside, you're so miserable and angry and upset because you can never, ever meet to their expectations. They keep increasing the bar, increasing. And yet, you know what? I remember years ago, I asked Rick on the show, I said, Rick, these governing bodies, body members, you think they go out in field service? And he said, no. Now, remember, which one was the Tony Morris?
Tight Pants.
Yeah, Tony Tight Pants. Do you remember? That was a Sunday morning. And he left New York and he crossed the line and went to New Jersey to that bottleneck liquor store just so he wouldn't be seen. And it was a Sunday morning. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how come he wasn't out in service? But yet they have no problem being able to put all these mandates on all the witnesses until they absolutely break.
Grace, is something that you said that I wanted to comment on. They didn't give you a reason why you couldn't be baptized. If you were going to the Kingdom Hall, even though you weren't baptized, and you hear Armageddon, the only protection you have is if you're dedicated to Jehovah God, okay, and you show your dedication by baptism. If they're not willing to baptize you, you say Armageddon's coming right around the corner. I'm gonna be lost. I'm gonna be killed. I'm gonna be killed. I'll never be in the new system. That's anxiety. Yeah, and it's hypervigilance. Anytime you hear anything that's happening in the world, like right now, Israel's having a problem with Iran. Oh my God, Armageddon's going to come tomorrow. I know when I was in, we had a brother walked up to the platform, just stood there and stared into the audience without saying a word, and said, brothers, do you know what's happening? Two things is composite sign that Red China has been is in the UN, and at that time it was the Wild Beast, but JW's joined it, but that's another story. And there was an earthquake in San Francisco. It's on its way, brothers. It's on its way. Now, if you're a non-baptized person, because they wouldn't let you get baptized for whatever reason, they probably didn't even tell you, Grace, but whatever, your anxiety is, oh my God, it's going to come.
Right.
And these brothers won't baptize me. I'm going to lose my life. It's going to be horrible. No flesh would survive if they didn't get the day shot. It's going to be so terrible.
Right.
And the anxiety gets up.
And that shame, Rich, that's toxic shame.
That's
trauma. That's trauma right there.
Trauma. So I'm glad you brought it up, Grace.
Psychological trauma.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Trauma can come in different forms. That's psychological trauma.
Very apropos.
Thank you, Grace. And honey, what a blessing in a way, really, that you were never baptized.
Yeah, big blessing.
A real big blessing. Now you can see the other side of the coin. So thank you, sweetheart, for your comment. We always appreciate that. Okay.
Well, Rick has given us another 15 minutes.
Oh, has he?
No, I mean, he did.
Oh, yeah, 9 o'clock.
Yeah, so
yeah.
It's a little after 9. I'll take one more question or comment, and then we'll hand it over to Rick.
I'm just curious to know if our friend Joe is there. Joe, if you're there, would you call in? Not sure if he is.
Okay, anybody?
Go ahead, Apostle Babe. You run with us. Go ahead, Apostle Babe.
I didn't realize my phone was open, but hello.
Hi there.
My microphone got turned on accident, but I really enjoyed the show.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, honey.
Yeah.
We're trying to, find information that's practical for everybody to really be able to use in their life, to be able to empower yourself, to really realize, the mind games Watchtower has played with your mind, so that you can be able to be effective in moving forward out of this cult in a healthy way, mentally and physically, spiritually, all above, but especially with regards to toxic shame. There's no reason why you should, let me tell you, we're Christians, and we know that Jesus loves everybody. Bottom line, how do I know that? Because he died a horrific death for each and every one of us. I don't care what Watchtower teaches. He died a horrific death just so that you could have eternal life. Okay, that will never change. I don't care what Watchtower teaches. I don't care what they say to try to use any toxic shame. Those people are very, very evil, and they don't come from God. They're not Christian. They're very demonic, very, very demonic and evil. And not until you can wake up to really realize you got to take that power back in your life and move on. I mean, don't be a prisoner in bondage, in solitary confinement and bondage to this organization, because it has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with Christ. It has nothing to do with Christianity. It has nothing to do with God's promises to you. It's a man-made corporation in the disguise of a religion that has so-called 8 million people duped so they can manipulate and control your life, and you can be nothing more than a good-for-nothing slave so you can make them richer and more powerful. There were what is it, Rich? $7 billion. Okay, don't be a fool playing into their game. Wake up, people, move on, and you will not be destroyed by Armageddon. Okay, God loves you. He knows the trauma that each and every one of us have gone through.
And I always say this, there is a spirit that runs Jehovah's Witness organization, but it's not our Heavenly Father's Holy Spirit.
No.
It's a spirit of Satan and devil who is a liar. And if you just look at how many times the Watchtower has told you they know when Armageddon's coming, even though the Bible says Jesus doesn't even know.
Right.
But they know,
Right.
because they hear right from Jehovah God himself.
That's a lie.
Jehovah God bypasses Jesus and tells the governing body. Does that make sense?
Well, now they think that Jesus is nothing
Michael,
more than Michael the Archangel.
Oh, that's crazy.
I mean,
they're getting crazier and crazier. And thank God for Rick, who started 6 Screens.
yes.
All this information's coming out. Now you've got some wonderful YouTubers.
Oh, there's a lot
really
of
good stuff. I mean, well researched. Yeah, that's well researched and well done.
Tell me, Dr. K. TELLME. Doctor's DR.K. Watch him. He is really great. Tell me, Dr. K. Start watching him. He's new. He just popped up, a couple weeks ago. Oh my gosh, is he good? He's great. From 1 to 10, he's a 20. He's very good. He's got the cutest little African accent. I don't know which country he's from, but when he speaks slowly, you can understand what he's saying. And he is just spot on with regards to Watchtower.
And Lady C, and the JT?
JT and Lady C, excellent. Critical thinkers.
They're excellent.
Excellent. John Ledger, Jonathan Ledger,
And our own.
Watchtower Examiner. Yeah.
Go ahead, brother. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is Stephen. I just wanted to chime in on exactly what your wife said about Dr. K. What impresses me, not so much about him specifically, even though his videos are awesome. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But let's just take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
We as ex-witnesses know all about this organization. When we talk about it, we know about it, we know its history, and we enjoy discussing it. But now we have people who have never been Jehovah's Witnesses, perhaps they're curious about it, perhaps they've read some of our videos, who have done their own research, and they can point out all the fallacies with this organization. Watchtower has a humongous problem, if you really think about it.
Oh,
because they can sit up there all day long and talk about apostates, stay away from these apostates. But people like Dr. K, and there's a host of people who are non-witnesses who discuss not just witnesses, but other cults and false religious groups as well. So it's not just apostates that are saying these things.
Right.
Watchtower has a major problem. There is nowhere for them to go because everybody knows what they're all about. Even non-witnesses, people who have never been Jehovah's Witnesses, know more about this organization, what the history of it is, what's even going on now, than those that are actual witnesses. So it's one thing for them to say, guard yourself from the quote-unquote apostates. It's another thing when you have non-witnesses who are basically publishing the same content online. And it's amazing, and it's definitely going to bring down Watchtower because Watchtower can't stop people from going on the internet. Our whole life at some point is going to be on the internet. They're going to come across these videos, or they're going to come across people who have watched these videos who are going to ask them about this organization, and hopefully something that they say will trigger something, and they'll go out and do research, and they don't have to go to quote unquote apostate sites. They can go to people like Dr. K. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. That's an excellent comment. Very, very good. Yeah, and like I say, we're like a tsunami. Watchtower cannot stop us. It's freedom of speech. People have that right, that liberty. And yet, like you say, there are people who have never been witnesses. And yet, I think he has some of the best. And of course, XJW Critical Thinker with JT and Lady C. They're awesome. There's so many that are out there. Blue Envelope is a good one.
Yeah, Fern.
John Ledger. Vern. Oh my gosh, there's so many. But it's a tsunami, and Watchtower is terrified, absolutely terrified, because they don't want people to know the truth about the so-called truth. Yeah. So we thank everybody so much for listening in. We love you very much. Hopefully you can take some information and share this video with others. And we thank you so much.
Yeah, we do.
Well, very good show, Dick and Constance. In fact, at the control panel here over Massachusetts, I'm looking at some really good numbers here. You brought some really good numbers. A lot of people coming in tonight. I'm going to go on the record. I haven't totally thoroughly researched it, but this may be your highest listened to program yet. So good job. Good job. Keep up the good work. So we like to see a lot of activity. And boy, we're seeing it here tonight. You guys did a great job. And don't you ever let your visions die. Keep cranking away at it.
Thank you, Rick.
Good night, everybody. God bless.
Thank you.
Well, that's Dick and Constance Borghi. So glad to have them part of the Six Screens Telenetwork. Hey, we are going to JW World News. That's coming up next. You don't want to miss it. Right now, Dick kind of alluded to it, but what's going on in the Middle East? Well, the witnesses are getting their go bags ready. We'll be talking about that next, right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork. Thank you, everybody. We're going to end this program, JW World News, coming up next, right here on the Six Screens Telenetwork.